Hey you guys, this is Josh
And Carolyn.
with Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought.
This week we are talking about how much land you need to raise a year's worth of food.
Wow, that's a big topic to try to tackle.
It is kind of a big topic, and we may be a little pushed for time in this, but we thought we'd really like to cover this, a lot as a follow-up to the conversation we had a couple weeks ago about how much meat you need how many animals you need to raise in order to have enough meat for a year for your household. And so this is kind of a follow-up on that idea.
Yeah, and there's a lot of rules of thumb. There's no one size fits all. Depends on your family, depends on the land. A lot of depends, as you hear, and people don't like that, but that's the reality. But we've got a lot of good rules of thumb that can help you come up with a pretty good summary, I think we'll have here.
Yeah.
And it gives people a good guideline. But
I think
first,
got
a little chit chat.
a little bit of chit chat. If you're brand new to the pantry chat, I know some of the last few pantry chats that came out, we got a lot of comments about the chit chat. People were brand new and they weren't expecting the chit chat. So if you're brand new, there's always chit chat, but we do have things time-stamped for you so you can skip ahead to the main topic if you're not into the chit chat, but the rest of us really like it.
So hang out for a few minutes.
Hang out, have a cup of coffee. All right. What have you been up to?
Wow, what have I been up to? Well, we've just had another round of piglets, and this is a continuous struggle for us. And this was a proven sow who did great last year, and this year we've lost every piglet but one this time.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure that out, it's a bummer. It really is a bummer. It's not fun. We've got the last piglet in the house, and it looks like we're going to go ahead and take care of that one ourselves.
Yeah.
And get that one along. So that's kind of the most recent. Otherwise,
we have never had problems with animals
and
this level.
Well, and this is why I've never wanted to breed pigs.
Yeah.
I've always heard that pigs are challenging, that there's more fatalities. They're smaller. The pig to the size of the piglet's a different ratio, right? And just even to a cow to a calf or a sheep to a lamb. And we've raised lots of those. We've had very little challenges.
Yeah.
The pig thing's been tough. And so I don't know if it's the breed. I don't know if we're doing something wrong somewhere. We're figuring it out and we'll get there. But yeah, it's been a challenge. It's why I stayed away from it for so many years. And I'm going to persevere. This is something we want to nail because pigs, in my mind, are an essential part of the homestead. They fill a spot in the recycling of food, materials. They fit a really good spot on the homestead. So, but we don't want to have to buy them every year because feeders have gotten very expensive.
They are very expensive, especially non-rooting pigs. They are like ridiculously expensive.
Well, even regulars. We're buying a couple to make up for our losses and to apply into the deep bedding in the barn system that do root. So we want that in certain situations, and so those are. They're still expensive. They've just gone up over the years from when we first started, buying feeder pigs, say, 18 years ago or whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, on happy news, all the lambs are still alive, and we're waiting any day to have little goat kids, probably.
Kids. Got one calf on the ground, beef calf, and more to come, presumably.
Yeah, a whole bunch more to come, I think. Between beef and dairy, we have
hopefully a couple dairy calves.
A handful.
Yeah.
So.
What about you? How are you doing?
I have been sick.
Yes, you have.
I have been actually quite sick. I don't know if this is COVID. It sounds like COVID. Everybody else in the community seems to have COVID right now. We didn't do any testing, but this one just laid me flat.
Unusual for you to be down this long.
Yeah, as in flat in bed, like for days and days and days. And so you can probably still hear it in my voice. I'm a little congested, a little my mind feels kind of fuzzy. That's probably the worst part. I don't like the brain fog. Yeah. But so if I say something totally off the wall, you'll know why. It's just a little bit of brain fog floating around. But so a lot of energy just going towards recuperating and getting healthy. But I have to say, if you have to be sick, this is a good time of year. It's not even sunny outside for us here in North Idaho. We're still getting kind of sleety, rainy, snowy outside, so you don't really want to be outside. There's nothing happening in the garden. There's just some plant started. So, if I have to be sick, it's a good moment for it.
That's the way to look at it. You're gonna perk up and be ready just in time for the sunshine and spring weather.
All the spring work.
Yep.
Get to it, huh?
Yep, you betcha.
All right.
Well, glad you're here. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. Well, one other thing we want to talk about is about this week's sponsor for the podcast. And I've got to tell you guys, I just purchased for the first time American Blossom towels and just ran them through the washing machine, and I am completely in love. They are totally soft and they are going to last forever. They're amazing towels. American Blossom is sponsoring this podcast. And for any of you guys who don't know, they are an American company who uses all American grown
cotton,
yep, all American processed cotton too. So it is on our soil. It stays here, It's grown here, it's processed here, it's shipped from here. And that is really amazing. And it's something that's really near and dear to my heart because the state of our fiber production here in the United States is very bad. It's actually dismal.
You think computer chips are bad?
Yeah.
Yeah. Textiles are really bad as far as being sold out to other places in the world like China.
And one of the reasons for that is because it's expensive to produce them here.
Well, and it's been made expensive, and this is one of the complaints we hear from some of you about companies like American Blossom is the expense, and we get it, but here's the problem. The system is set against them.
Yeah.
And it's set to make it easy to bring in cheap imports. If we as people, as consumers, want to change that, we've got to take some steps where we can and buy these American-made products. And yes, pay a little bit more. You're getting a good quality though, at least in this company.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are some American companies that maybe it's arguably as good as somewhere else. But nonetheless, if you want to see more American products, we've got to be willing to let go of a few extra dollars to support those American companies that have an uphill battle to give us a good product for a reasonable price. The more people that do that, eventually, the more a company like this will bring their prices down.
But they really stand behind their product because
Absolutely.
you're getting what you pay for, right?
Good product.
And you get a 2-year warranty on it. You guys, you're not going to get that from cheap $15 towels from your local Walmart. It's just not going to happen. So you really get what you pay for, and it's a really great quality. I really recommend you guys check it out and put your money, vote with your money on what you want to see in our country. You want to see some good sustainable fiber production. It's a good way to go.
And we're able to help out with that. American Blossoms is giving homesteading family subscribers 20% off of your, I think, entire order. Is that right?
Believe so, yeah. So you just use a coupon code, Homesteading Family, all written out as one word, for 20% off as you go check out. So check out the link below.
Yep. And keep coming back. We're going to keep working to bring you American-made products.
Yeah.
We want to highlight those this year and get more people buying American. So keep your ears and eyes open for that.
There you go.
All
right. Question of the day.
You betcha. Let's see. Got one here from you I can't say that name and numbers, but it's from the video. 7 reasons why you should homestead this year. This person's question is around antibiotic resistance. If it happens, would one also be resistant to herbal antibiotics like nasturtium or oregano tinctures?
This is a really great question. Antibiotic resistance is happening. It's not an if it happens, it is happening. People are dying of it actually in fairly staggering numbers at this point. But the great news is that no, it does not happen with herbal antibiotics. The reason for that is our modern medicines, antibiotics that we use, often have between 1 and 2 active compounds that they're working with. Right. Sometimes, last I checked, there was one that actually had 3 compounds. That's as advanced as we've been able to get because of the interaction between all those different compounds is actually really, really advanced.
When we're making it in the lab, when they're making it in the lab. Right.
If you look at something like garlic or some of the natural antibiotics that we have in the herbal world, they'll often have over 300 compounds. So what that means is it's like, is it easier for you to put together a puzzle that has 2 or 3 pieces or a puzzle that has 300 pieces? So the bacteria are really able to figure out this really simple puzzle of like 3 different pieces. They start being able to actually communicate with each other how to solve it. But when you get up to something that has 200 and 300 different compounds in it, they just can't crack that code. It's just too advanced for them.
Right.
So that's the really good news in the herbal world, and a reason I really recommend, if you're interested in this topic, you go check out the book Herbal Antibiotics by Stephen Herod-Booner. I hope I said his name correctly. I'll put a link for you down in the description. Yeah. But go check that out and read it, and you'll get a really firm understanding of what's going on with herbal, with antibiotic resistance, and why herbs are a great answer to that.
Hard to beat what God's already put in place.
Yeah, it really is.
Yep.
Hey, you want to just move on to the main topic here?
Okay.
I think we're pushing our time already.
Alrighty. Yeah, and there's a bit to cover here. How much land do you need to raise a year's worth of food?
Yeah, that's a big topic.
Yeah, let's qualify a little bit. This isn't 100% total self-sufficiency. We're not talking about raising 100% of everything you need, okay? We're talking about garden space for vegetables. We're talking about fruit trees, probably fruit bushes in there, right? Raising fruit and nuts, livestock, all the different livestock from chickens all the way up to cows, medicinal, culinary herbs.
Right.
Those types of things that are reasonable on the average homestead to raise. We're not talking some of the, salt for one, or pepper, or some of your things that take special environments to raise. Nor are we talking grains. That's kind of another subject. So that's maybe the core one that's not in here, because most of us have a significant part of our diet to some percentage of grains. It's kind of a whole nother discussion. We're certainly not as knowledgeable about that as we are about these other things. But usually when we're having this conversation, it's kind of around these core topics.
Yeah, and there's things that you're just not going to be able to grow in your environment that you're going to want to bring in. I mean, coffee and chocolate, for me, come to the top of the list. We're just not going to grow those things here in North Idaho. So, we're going to purchase those in. Up here for us, olives and olive oil. That's a big one.
Yeah. Well, and the goal, we don't need to get too far on this trail, but the goal is not total self-sufficiency.
Right.
It's lessening our dependence on outside systems and building resiliency, not only with our own land, but within our community. We're still probably always going to bring in other things from afar.
Yeah.
That's actually good. That's actually good economics.
Yeah.
Trade is good at the right level.
Okay, so let's start off. How much land are we using? Now, we need to qualify this because we have a very large family, right? So there's often 15 people, or right about 15 people at our table throughout the year. So most people who are listening to this don't have those kind of numbers that they're dealing with. Yeah. So just please take that all in, consideration when you're hearing the numbers that we're talking about for our family.
Right. Yeah, so we're using just under 5 acres predominantly, okay, and producing most of what we just mentioned outside of our beef cows. Our beef cows need a little bit more land, so they're on both some of our other part of our 40 acres that's not great pasture, and then sometimes leased out for our beef. But our dairy, all of our dairy, our lamb, our pork, our eggs, our meat chickens, our vegetables, most of our fruit, not all of it. We do get a little fruit out.
Medicinal
culinary herbs, right? So we're covering the bulk of it on under 5 acres. And I got to say, on that 5 acres, there's houses, barns, and a couple ponds. So we're not actually utilizing 5 acres of land. I'd say we're probably utilizing 4 maybe.
And would you classify us as having to work really intensively in those acres, in those 4 acres?
We're fairly intensive. I mean, we're applying some intensive methods. We're doing rotational grazing and multiple animals in the same space. And our gardening is I wouldn't call it super intensive, but it's not dry land gardening.
There's also, though, a lot of empty space in that area, places we're just not using.
There's a lot of room to
cultivation.
fill, and we are filling. We're spreading out more trees because fruit is one that we'd like to produce more of. You know, we should be able to get to 100% of our own fruit outside of what we want to buy because we can't grow it here.
Yeah.
We're not there yet. So yeah, there is room within that, as you said, to still fill in the spaces, expand the garden if we need to. We've got kids getting older that you know, we have families one day, and we've got room even within that space to expand into that a bit.
So I just want you guys to hear that. We're feeding almost 15 people year-round and growing a huge percentage of our own food. Not all of it by any means, and yes, we do still occasionally go to the grocery store. But we're doing that all on less than 4 acres in production.
Yeah.
Minus the beef.
Usable land, yeah.
So that's actually, you know, pretty good, because you kind of think when you hear homesteading, you feel like maybe you need, you know, 20 acres, 40 acres.
Yeah.
You need a lot of land, you know.
Yep.
Maybe
That's what
not.
you're here. Maybe not.
Maybe not
and,
so
you know,
much.
it certainly depends on your water situation is a huge factor, and we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. But there are some rules of thumb that we can apply to this. So let's go through. Let's talk about gardening a little bit. How much space do you need for a vegetable garden?
For a vegetable garden. Okay, so first of all, I do want to say, if we're talking about growing a year's worth of food, we have a great podcast back. I'll put a link to that also in the description for you, with Melissa K. Norris, about starting to grow a year's worth of different foods in your garden. So if you're interested in that, you may want to go check that out. But conventional wisdom when it comes to gardening space is, if you're talking regular row gardening, where you're putting everything, you know, a row of carrots and a row of onions and a row of spinach, we're talking about 100 square foot per person for fresh eating only. If all you're looking to do is just be able to eat out of your garden, you know, throughout the year, then you're about 100 square feet. If you want to actually preserve your food, to have, you know, preserved food put up for winter time, we're talking about 200 square foot per person in the garden.
Right.
Of garden row.
Yep.
And that's of actual bed space.
Yeah.
That's not walkways.
And that's assuming adequate water. That's assuming both adequate rainfall, or you've got a well, you've got something to water. Most gardens, vegetable gardens, need on average about 1 inch of water a week. So that's assuming you have that in place. If you are in a drought situation, you're in drier land, or you don't have water, you can still grow that food. You're just going to start to spread everything out and move toward a dry farming model. That's going to take more space. You're going to add 25, 50%, maybe 100% to that, depending on how dry you are.
So I think we probably can't say it enough that any numbers that we throw out here are really just rules of thumb, and they're just for easy reference, a starting spot for you to have something to work off of, right? Because it really depends so much. Water depends on your soil condition. There are just so many different, pest pressure, what kind of pest pressure you're dealing with. You know, there's a lot of factors.
Can I throw out a book here?
Yes.
Steve Solomon, Gardening When It Counts.
Oh yeah, that's a
He
good one.
covers this very, very well. It's an older book. He covers this very, very well and goes through the scenarios on you know, kind of, you're really intense and you've got all the moisture in the soil, like richness that you need, to that depleted soil dry farming scenario, and talks through that amongst a lot of other things. So excellent book around this. But for the point of this discussion, most people, if you had 200 square foot per person in your household, you could grow most of your own vegetables, if not all of them.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
That is pretty good. That's not a lot. That's not
really
as much as we tend to think.
Well, especially, you know, if there's 2 of you guys at home, 4 of you guys at home, that actually becomes a nice doable number.
Yeah.
Now you want to add a little bit to that if you want to add in culinary and medicinal herbs, but even that does not take that much room.
Yeah.
Yep. Good.
Very good. Anything else on gardening? Did we want to talk about, let's talk about the culinary and the herbs for a second. Like, you giving people an idea how much space?
I don't really have a number for that. No, I really don't know, but it doesn't take very much to throw a few herbs out into a garden. And honestly, you can put those, you can sprinkle them throughout the edges of the gardens and in the edges of the space, because a lot of those are perennials anyways. So you want to think about a place where they can stay year after year and not get in the way of your annual row crop gardening. that's what you're doing.
Yeah, the cottage garden up here, I'd say it's under 1,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And you're growing herbs and medicinals and a lot there. That's a nice size, productive garden.
And again, that's for, covering about 15 people.
Right.
That stuff
Yeah.
comes out of
So
that.
that's large.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Fruit and nut trees.
Okay.
This is a good one. I'm so glad we're tackling this one because that's people want as many trees as we can get, which so do I. That's good.
So
But
do
like,
we.
what do you really need? And is it good to have too many trees?
Yeah. Well, there comes a point where you just have too many of something,
Yeah.
right? So unless you're looking at a commercial orchard where you're going to be doing a U-pick or selling something, which you really do need to keep up with. That's not just, throw it out there and maybe I do, maybe I don't, if you have that much fruit. So unless you're looking at a scenario like that, you need enough for your family. You need enough to be able to maybe give some away. And maybe you want a little bit extra to be able to feed some animals under. Mm-hmm. So you're really looking at 1 to 2 trees of any given type of tree, apples versus pears versus cherries, per family of 4. But you don't generally need more than about 2 trees.
Right. And we're talking, say, semi-dwarf trees, right? Not really small dwarf trees, not large full-size trees. And semi-dwarfs are kind of the most common that we have out there at this point that people are utilizing. And how much space does that take really, again, depends on the variety of the tree, even within, say, talking about semi-dwarf. So just if you're thinking, a couple trees per family of 4, then look up the type of fruit you can grow in your area that you want, and you'll figure out the canopies and the spacings for those.
And all of these things are kind of an adjust as you go. You get in, you kind of start somewhere, and then you realize, gosh, I just don't need this many. I cannot actually imagine the scenario in my head where I'm like, I just don't need this much fruit here on the property, but I know it does exist. But,
It's because we haven't gotten there yet.
Because
We've
we
gotten
haven't
there with
gotten there yet.
onions and carrots and
Right,
potatoes
exactly.
and beans,
Like, we
and
don't need
we're
any
there. We've found that spot. We haven't found it with fruit yet.
With fruit. So, but maybe it's the opposite is true, and you're just like, hey, I just don't have enough apples to get me all the way through the year without having to buy apples, or I just don't have enough cherries to get the amount of cherry pie filling that I want on the shelf and have fresh eating. Well, then you just add some as you go. So it's always going to be kind of a give and take and an adjustment where, you start with your best guess and then you adjust as you go.
Yeah. I was trying to do some quick math in my head because we didn't have numbers, but a semi-dwarf tree with a canopy of 15 feet, right? What is that? That's... Trying to do the quick math here.
That's impressive.
It's only a couple 100 square feet per tree, so it's not a lot.
Okay.
And then remember, you guys, and it's not the place to talk about it now, but understand permaculture. Look into food foresting because you can get a lot more on that square footage than just a tree. You might get some fruit bushes under there, some strawberries, some of your perennials. There's just a whole world out there to where you're going to make more use out of that space than just one single tree.
Yeah.
Say if you figure 250 square feet per tree, I think that's a little bit large for a semi-dwarf.
Yeah.
On the canopy.
Well, and that gives you an idea. What are the different types of fruits that you want to eat?
Yeah. Or nuts. Don't leave out nuts. I know nuts take longer to get to a harvest, and we've been slow to get nuts onto this property, but they're very, very worthwhile. And add to your resiliency tremendously besides your ability to feed livestock.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Not only can you eat them yourself, and they're a great source of protein and fat, but you can also feed them to the animals, and they store really well. So, that's a great way to go. Okay, so switching to livestock.
Okay.
Livestock.
So we're going to run through a few of the common homestead animals here.
Now, if you've followed us for very long, you'll know that for us, the milk cow is one of the top most important animals on the homestead for us, at least in our belief, because you can get so much out of a milk cow.
If you utilize your dairy cow, she is the most productive animal on the homestead, and I would say the second most productive unit, your garden being the most. If you're making the most out of what you get, the dairy cow provides so much for you.
Yeah, I mean, you've got milk, butter, cream, cheese, ice cream. The list just keeps going on. It's amazing.
And let's not forget free fertilizer, something that people overlook. we're talking 50 pounds a day of free fertilizer that can go on your pasture or into your garden to make that garden more productive. So,
well, and the other thing, you talked about the pigs at the beginning of our chat here today, and cows and pigs go together so nicely because those pigs, along with chickens, will eat the leftover milk or clabber, and so it becomes a really great symbiotic relationship there.
yeah.
So, yeah.
So, but the $1 million question is, how much space do I need for a dairy cow? Okay, and we're talking grazing the cow at least half the year on pasture, I'd say.
Okay.
Okay, that's kind of the average scenario.
All right. Let me just ask the question because that kind of begs it. Can you just non-pasture a milk cow?
You can, and I did the math a lot of years ago. And when we were still in California and the feed was expensive, and it panned out, say we had a minimum dry paddock. It's dirt, but the good enough space, quarter acre or something to move around, shelter, all that stuff. And if we only fed purchased hay,
Okay.
would that work? And I can't remember the exact numbers.
Economically.
Economically, if we took the milk, made the butter, made the cheese, made the products, and didn't buy them, it worked economically just fine.
Okay.
And my friends Sean and Beth Doherty
Yeah.
would also say the same thing. If they had to start right now, and they had to start with not very much and have a dairy cow, they would have the dairy cow. She's that worth it. So yes,
Well,
it can be done.
Talking the health side and what that can do for the health in the household
Yeah.
and on the homestead, because
Yeah.
that's a whole nother topic. But it is one of the top things you can
Right.
do for your own, nutrition levels in your household.
But I'd want not less than a quarter acre, just so the cows got room to move around, and you got to do some things a little bit differently because they don't have grass out there to eat and do their thing. So a little bit different there, but it can be done.
Okay.
When it comes to pasturing, I'm going to say 2 to 3 acres is not very many places you're going to be able to do less than that. Maybe a little with really, really good management.
Okay.
But I'd say 2 to 3 acres is a good place that you can graze that cow throughout the season. And with good management, that's going to go really, really well for you. The drier it gets, the more land you're going to need to do that. And so I'm thinking somewhere around high 20s, 30 inches a year, for that 2 to 3, which is what we're at here.
Okay. High 20s inches of rain.
Yeah, toward 30 inches and up to keep that acreage down and be getting, or you've got to be able to irrigate it and water, which sometimes people have that option as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Sounds
that's the dairy cow. Now we're going to learn that we can actually stack a few things with that dairy cow like we do here, and we'll kind of talk about that towards the end. But
Okay.
you can get more utilization out of that 2 to 3 acres.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, chickens. Let's talk about chickens.
All right. Let's talk about egg layers first. Yeah?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So egg layers, let's start with minimums. If you don't have free range, you don't have pasture, then I'm going to say, and you've got an enclosed pen, minimum of 6 square feet per chicken, okay, for you to have a healthy environment, okay? That's your coop and whatever your outdoor pen is combined. That's what I would want to see. Could you press it a little bit tighter? Yes, but that's really the ideal in there if they're not getting out. Now, if you can let them out the gate and you've got property for them to roam on and get out of the coop, then I wouldn't mind if the coop and yard is 3 to 4 foot per bird, but they're getting to get out in free range and get into vegetation and in the lawn or whatever it is you have.
Yeah. So when you're talking about, an average family of 4 probably needs about 10 to 15 chickens. That's not a whole lot of space.
No, it's not. No, you're talking, 10, you're talking 600 square feet, 900 square feet in a pen and yard. That's the way, Harvey Ustery has a setup like that. His are all pen, and that's kind of what he does. I don't think it's that many chickens, but that works really, really well if you manage it well. And then if you can let them out, great.
Okay. How are meat chickens different?
Meat chickens, you're generally, most of us when we're talking meat chickens, we are talking moving them around pasture, not just in a static pen where they're going out from. Now, you and I have done that, but we had land that was just near impossible to move chicken tractors on, but they had several acres to range out as far as they wanted. About the smallest you can do if you're going to do a rotation on chickens, and say on 75 birds a year, that's a pretty good number for a family of 4.
That's a very healthy number
You know,
for a family.
and that's what works in one standard chicken tractor of 10 by 12 feet. Okay, you can get that done in right around 6,300 square feet. So you're talking a little over 1/8 of an acre for those birds.
Okay.
Now, you could also move your layers behind that. You could also get 2 runs a year on that if you're in the right environment.
Okay.
You could also go down to 25 chickens and make a smaller pen and cut that space in half and get down to 3,000 square feet, say a little more for 25 chickens or so.
Okay.
But that's kind of the standard that we're working from, thinking a year's worth of food for 4 people.
So hopefully you guys are starting to get the picture that some of these things don't actually take as much land as you may have in your mind to be able to do. These are actually fairly small numbers for a large amount of produce that we're covering here.
Here's what's really cool before we go on. Both of those, meat chickens and egg layers, can be done behind the milk cow on the same acreage. So you don't need to add that acreage. You can stack it if you manage it well.
Okay. So that means you can just take your chickens and run them on the land we already talked about for the milk cow.
Right. Yep.
That's pretty cool.
That is very cool.
All right, pigs. What about pigs?
Well, what about pigs?
Okay, what about pigs? That's the question of the year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in general, a family, I don't know, our numbers are so big, we're generally wanting 3 or 4 pigs ourselves of varying sizes. So, average family here, we're talking a 4 or so. You want at least 1, but generally you want a buddy. So you're going to probably not raise less than 2 pigs. Yeah.
That would be ideal.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And, how much space do you need? You start to get into, are you trying to do some pastured pigs and move them around? If you are, you can do those in combination with these cows and chickens, assuming your land is there and you've either brought up the fertility of it and the health, or you're using it to get there, and you can pasture them. If you're not, then you can either pen them or you can put them in some forested and brushy areas. Now, I haven't done that in so long. I don't have a number in my head for a non-pastured pig. How much space do they need? I don't have that. I would say, at least 250 square feet per pig if you're doing them in just pens. And you're feeding them and you're letting them just root and wallow. It's not my favorite way to do it. But if you've got to get by and that's what you've got to get started, I'd want that 250 square feet per pig to give them room to move and make sure they've got a clean area and they've got area to get away from their bathroom area and their feed and all of that, if you're not doing the pastured thing.
Now, with the pastured and non-rooting pigs, we've also had a lot of luck with stacking them in spaces that other things have been in, or just on the edges around the property with a little bit of electric fence, where they're actually cleaning up, the edges of the walkways, or living under the orchard trees, or, in little bits of the garden that we're like done with for the moment, and that can be turned over, or, we don't mind having the pigs in there eating through things.
Yeah, your grazing pigs are great. They'll stay in with a single low wire that you can walk and drive over so it doesn't get in the way. And yeah, you can put them in all the fringes. Besides, put them into the rotation with the milk cow and the chickens out there on that, say, 3 acres.
All right.
3 acres.
Lamb. Let's talk about lamb. And kind of right along with lamb is goats in a lot of ways. They kind of need a lot of the same space requirements, I think.
Yeah, I'd lump them together. Goats, we don't know so much about, and goats are a little more browsers, and so there's a big discussion. Are goats going to do well just on pasture in the long term?
Right.
Because they're a little more browsers.
Yeah.
Most people, if you're going to raise lamb, you want at least 2.
Yeah.
Depends on the size of them, but again, you don't get just one single animal like that. Dairy cow's a little bit different. You're working with her personally. She'll often have a calf, but when you're getting to these other animals like pigs, lambs, goats, they really need a buddy. You need to at least go in 2s.
Okay.
So I would say doing 2. I really don't want to raise a lamb in a pen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to recommend that. I'm not even going to give a minimum size on that. People do it. We did it in the early years.
Yeah.
And it's just not a great way to go. Lambs need to be out on pasture. Pigs are different. Pigs, while I like our pastured pigs, pigs can root. They can be in the ground. You can throw lots of stuff out there. It's fine. Not lambs. They need to be out on pasture.
Okay.
And gosh, a minimum on the lamb. I don't really have that in my head, but you could get a couple lambs in decent pasture. I'd say half acre.
Yeah.
You know.
So it's very interesting because if you have that land set aside for the milk cow, where you were talking 2 to 3 acres for a milk cow, a lot, I mean, pretty much everything else we've talked about can fit and stack inside that same 2 to 3 acres.
For so far, yeah.
So far.
Yeah, so far it can do that with good management. And we're talking multi-species rotational grazing, where you have a plan to move them through the land, not just throwing them all out there onto 2 to 3 acres free range. Don't want to do that. You're going to have problems. This isn't going to work. It might work for the dairy cow or just the lambs or just the chickens, but that's not the way you want to manage your land anyway. It's kind of a different subject here, but this is all in terms of rotational grazing, which is what makes all this work. And like your intensive gardening or building soil fertility, where you can get a lot into a small space, with multi-species rotational grazing, you can do all of this in a fairly small space.
So if we're talking food for a year for an average family of, say, 4, I mean, you really don't need much more than this. I mean, if you've got your milk cow and you're getting a calf every year, you probably have your beef taken care of at that point.
You do. If you
have chickens and then pigs and some sheep, I mean, you've got a lot covered right here.
Now let's talk about the cattle for just a minute, because a lot of people do want beef, and so you're raising that. If, say, you're raising a beef animal from the dairy cow in the beginning, not much impact. That calf is eating off of mama, but as it grows, it's going to need more and more land, and as it gets to maturity, it's going to need about what the dairy cow needs. Not quite as much. It's not as high, high a need as what the dairy cow needs to take in, but you're still going to need a couple more acres if you're going to, say, be running a full-size feeder beef animal on your land, whether you're raising it up or whether you're buying one in. So
Which usually means taking it to a second year. Is that correct?
Usually means taking it to a second year.
So that means essentially you end up with 2 adult. You've got your milk cow, and she's got that new calf, this year's calf, and then you have that, the one that you're growing out for butcher. So at any given point, if you're maxing, you only need 1 beef animal a year, and everything goes well, if everything goes well. That's like a joke in the homesteading world, right? If everything goes well when we're talking about animals. But you're essentially needing space for 2 adult animals.
Right, yeah. So you're pushing that up, towards, I'd say, 5 acres of pasture.
Okay.
If you're going to try to get that dairy cow and the beef animal in there, and you're going to mix some of these other things for the average scenario. Again, a lot of factors here in the quality of your soil, moisture, whatnot, trying to give some ideas of what's doable and possible.
Right.
But that one really, increases your needs there, that large
cattle,
animal.
The large animal. Now, the good news is that you can very sufficiently feed a family without that beef animal. So if you're working with less land, again, let's look at this picture. What we keep seeing over and over again is some of these projects, you can create a lot of food in a pretty small amount of space. So let's say you're an average family of 4, you get decent rainfall. What do you think you have to have in order to fill your pantry, fill your freezers, and have enough to, have a decent diversity of food? For a year.
Man, 3 to 5 acres. 5 acres to me is like a sweet spot. And there's an old book on that, like 5 Acres in Independence or something like that. I know we have it on the shelf somewhere. And it really does get to that place where if you've got, adequate rainfall, adequate water, it's not all forested.
Okay.
So I'm thinking you've got 3.5 acres in pasture. Let's call it 3. Let's say you've then got an acre to play with for gardens, herb gardens, fruit trees, all your perennials, and then you've got an acre that goes to house, garage, barn, roads. That's a pretty sweet situation in the right place where you've got enough water to provide for a family like that. Can you do it on less? Yes, depending on your needs. You might not. We eat a lot of meat. Some families don't eat as much meat as we do. There's different ways to approach this. That's why I'd say 3 to 5. You could probably take that down. Again, it could definitely go up depending on what you're trying to accomplish, and if you're in a drier area, or you've got more woods on the property or whatever, then you may need more land.
Okay. So 3 to 5 acres for some semblance of self-sufficiency, right?
Yeah, a lot. You can do a lot with that. And in fact, be careful about doing too much. Some people come in and they want 40 acres. And it's a lot to tackle. Look, we've been here for 6 years. We've been doing this for nearly 20. We've been on this property for 6 years, and we're just starting to reach out. We're just starting to clear some land for additional pasture in year 6. It's taken us, 5+ years to really get a handle of about 5 acres.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to have if you have it out there, but you don't need it. I think, to me, that's the message here today, is you can do a lot with a lot less than most people think. And that makes it more attainable.
And the place to start with all of it is just start doing what you can at the place that you are right now, and use the land that you have available to you right now, and learn while you're there. Then you'll actually be ready when you'll have your skill will be ready when you're ready to move up inside us on the land.
Please do. Please max out the land that you have, the suburban lot, whatever it is, wherever you're at, before you move up. Prove that you can utilize every bit of that land well. You'll be a huge way ahead of the ball game when you step up to a new piece of property.
Hey, if you want any of the numbers or anything that we talked about in this pantry chat, check out the blog post that we have attached. And it's been great hanging out with you guys.
Okay, see you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.